The silence screamed louder than any alarm. Elias knew that silence. It was the breathless pause before the world ended, or before it ended again. Lena was gone. One moment, her small hand sketching furiously in the tattered notebook he'd salvaged. The next, only the faint charcoal lines of a lopsided airplane on the page, and an emptiness that clawed up his throat. Their sanctuary, a forgotten VIP lounge in the decaying grandeur of Terminal B, was too quiet. The stale air, usually thick with the scent of dust and their own faint, huddled warmth, now tasted of something else, a cloying, metallic tang he associated with them, the changed. "Lena?" His voice was a ragged whisper, swallowed by the faded velvet curtains and cracked marble. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at him. Not again. He wouldn't lose another. The memory, always lurking just beneath the surface, surged. Sarah's hand slipping from his grasp in the screaming chaos of the arrivals hall, the distant, horrifying thud of the last plane attempting to take off, only to spiral back down onto the tarmac like a wounded bird. Tom, his son, just a glimpse of his bright blue jacket swallowed by the tide of stampeding, terrified people. The airport, once a place of hopeful journeys, had become their tomb. His failure was a brand on his soul. A skittering sound from beyond the barricaded main doors, a sound like dry leaves or fingernails on glass. Then a low, wet gurgle. They were close. He grabbed the sharpened metal rod that had once been part of a luggage trolley, its point honed to a vicious edge. His knuckles were white. Every shadow danced with monstrous possibilities. Em. Where would she hide? She's small, quick. Think, Em. He moved, a ghost in the gloom, checking their usual spots. Behind the overturned cocktail bar, inside the cavernous, empty dumbwaiter shaft. Under the dusty grand piano whose keys now played only discordant notes when bumped. Nothing. The skittering grew louder, accompanied by a soft, rhythmic thumping against the reinforced doors. They were testing it, sniffing for weakness. "Lena," he hissed, louder this time, desperation fraying the edges of his control. His gaze fell upon the inert baggage carousel that snaked its way through a gaping hole in the wall, a dark maw leading to the unseen bowels of the terminal. She loved to imagine where it went, to fantastical lands beyond the wreckage of their world. But it was also a place of shadows, of unknown terrors. A muffled sob. From the carousel, relief warred with a fresh spike of fear. He scrambled towards it, heart hammering. The barricaded doors groaned, a splintering crack appearing near the reinforced hinges. No time. "Lena, come out. Now." The first of them squeezed through the widening gap. It was barely recognizable as human. Limbs elongated and twisted at unnatural angles, skin stretched taut and discolored over a skeletal frame. Its head craned, jaw unhinged, emitting that awful liquid clicking. Elias didn't hesitate. He lunged, driving the spear point into the creature's chest. It shrieked, a sound that scraped his nerves raw, and thrashed, black, oily fluid spurting from the wound. He wrenched the spear free, stumbling back as another, larger changed forced its way in, its eyes glowing with a feral, vacant light. He fought with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose but the last, flickering ember of his humanity embodied in a small, terrified girl. The confined space of the lounge became a whirlwind of desperate motion, the clang of metal, the sickening thuds, the unearthly cries of the changed. He took a searing pain to his arm as a clawed hand raked across it, but the adrenaline was afire in his veins. Then, a small dirt-stained hand reached out from the dark opening of the carousel's exit chute, lower down, near the floor. Lena. Her face was streaked with tears and grime, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his own. He kicked away a grasping changed, its teeth snapping inches from his leg, and pulled her out, shielding her small body with his own. "We have to go," he gasped, his lungs burning. "They know we're here. The lounge is. It's over." He looked at the carnage, the two contorted bodies of the changed twitching in their death throes. The splintered door, the growing chorus of guttural calls from the concourse beyond. The metallic tang was stronger now, mixed with something else, something acrid. Smoke? Lena clung to him, trembling. "I heard them," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "They were scratching for a long time." He nodded, his mind racing. Where? Where could they possibly go? Terminal B was a labyrinth of dangers, but it was the devil they knew. He scooped her up. She was too light. He had to find more food, proper shelter. As he moved towards a less obvious emergency exit hidden behind a tattered tapestry depicting a stylized world map, a new sound cut through the cacophony of the changed. It was distant, but unmistakable, the rhythmic, heavy tread of multiple booted feet, a sharp, barked command, not the changed, something organized. Something, in its own way, just as dangerous. Wardens. His blood ran cold. They were caught between the monsters without and the monsters within. The sanctuary was truly lost, and the vast, predatory darkness of the airport awaited. The sterile, recycled air of the Warden barracks in Terminal C always made Marcus's skin crawl. It was too clean, too devoid of the scent of decay and desperation that permeated the rest of Hartwell International. Sergeant Rexus, however, seemed to thrive in it. He strode ahead, his heavy combat boots echoing on the polished linoleum, his scarred face set in its usual granite expression of disdain for everything and everyone. Marcus trailed behind, his own rifle feeling heavy and unfamiliar. He was still new to this, still trying to reconcile the Warden's promises of order with the casual brutality he often witnessed. "See that, recruit?" Rexus jerked his chin towards a dark stain on the floor near a ransacked duty-free shop. They were on patrol, a routine sweep of the less civilized sectors bordering Warden territory. Scaver blood, fresh. One of them got careless. Rexus grinned, a chilling sight that displayed too many teeth. I encouraged his carelessness. Marcus swallowed, nodding dumbly. He'd heard the brief, choked scream earlier, followed by Rexus's gruff laugh. He hadn't seen what happened, and he hadn't dared ask. He'd joined the Wardens after the Great Silence, after watching his parents consumed by the initial wave of whatever had happened. The Wardens, led by the formidable Commander Thorn, had carved out a zone of apparent safety, a bastion against the horrors that roamed the terminals and the silent, dead world outside. They offered food, shelter, and a purpose, but the price was steep. They reached the main checkpoint, a formidable barricade of concrete barriers and razor wire constructed across Gate C-14. Beyond it lay the heart of Warden territory. As they were waved through, Marcus saw Commander Thorn himself, standing on a makeshift platform of stacked cargo crates, addressing a group of even newer recruits than Marcus. Thorn was a man built of iron and conviction, his voice a low, powerful rumble that commanded attention. "And some will tell you this order is too harsh," Thorn was saying, his gaze sweeping over the young, uncertain faces. "They will whisper of rights and freedom. But I ask you, what rights did the Great Silence respect? What freedom did it offer when the skies fell silent and the world tore itself apart?" His voice dropped, becoming almost intimate, yet carrying to every corner of the makeshift assembly hall. "There is only one right now, the right to survive, and there is only one freedom, the freedom from chaos. We, the Wardens, are the architects of that survival, the guardians of that freedom." Marcus listened, a familiar knot tightening in his stomach. Thorn's words were persuasive, logical even, in this broken world. He remembered the terror, the starvation, the constant, gnawing fear before he found the Wardens. "The changed are not our only enemy," Thorn continued, his voice hardening. "There is the rot of despair, the cancer of selfishness. Scavengers, hoarders, those who would prey on the weak rather than contribute to the collective, they are a symptom of the old world's disease. A disease we must eradicate." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We have reports of unauthorized settlements in Terminal B. Squatters, living in filth, undermining the stability we have bled to create. Terminal B will be cleansed. It is a necessary surgery to save the body." A murmur ran through the recruits. Cleansed. Marcus knew what that meant. Rexus had cleansed the scavenger earlier. He thought of the stories he'd heard from other patrols, of families driven out into the path of the changed, of supplies confiscated, of swift, brutal justice for any sign of resistance. Was this order? Or just a different kind of chaos, one with a uniform and a flag? Thorn's steely eyes seemed to find Marcus in the crowd, though he stood near the back with Rexus. "Loyalty," Thorn declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty, "is not a passive state, recruits. It is not mere obedience. Loyalty is proven by action, by the willingness to make the hard choices, to cut away the diseased flesh, no matter how much it screams." He swept his gaze across them all one last time. "Soon, you will all have your chance to prove it. To demonstrate that you are part of the cure, not the disease. The knot in Marcus's stomach tightened into a cold stone. He remembered the stories his grandmother used to tell, of old wars, of men who followed orders without question, and the horrors they unleashed. He had joined the Wardens for safety, for a world where he wouldn't have to watch people die senselessly. But as Thorne's final words echoed in the sterile air, a chilling doubt began to take root. Was he on the right side of the wall, or was the wall itself the monster? Rexus clapped him on the shoulder, a heavy, proprietary gesture. Pay attention, kid. The commander speaks truth. Time to earn your keep. The way Rexus smiled then, it wasn't reassuring, it was hungry. Elias pushed Lena ahead of him, deeper into the labyrinthine service corridors behind the gutted remains of Terminal B's food court. The rhythmic thud of Warden boots was closer now, echoing unnervingly in the narrow concrete passages. Each drip of water from a rusted pipe, each scuttling rat, sounded like a thunderclap in the suffocating tension. Lena, bless her resilient heart, was quiet, her small hand gripping his tightly, her eyes wide but focused. She'd seen too much, this child, endured too much. The thought fueled the desperate fire in his chest. This way, he whispered, pulling her towards a barely visible hatch concealed behind a fallen ventilation grate. He'd found it months ago, during a risky solo scavenging run. A relic of the airport's older infrastructure, forgotten on most blueprints. Their only chance. The sounds of the Wardens were splitting now, some heading down the main concourse, others fanning out. They were thorough, he'd give them that, thoroughly terrifying. He fumbled with the rusted latch, his injured arm throbbing, sending jolts of pain up to his shoulder. The metal shrieked in protest. He froze, listened. Only the distant, muffled shouts of the Wardens, the ever-present low growl of the airport's dying systems, and the faint, unsettling whispers of the Changed, always seeming to drift from the darkest corners. He forced the latch. The hatch creaked open, revealing a narrow, dark shaft dropping into blackness. An old maintenance ladder, slick with damp, clung to one side. I go first, he said, his voice tight. Stay right behind me. Don't look down. Easier said than done. He slung the spear across his back, took a deep breath that tasted of mold and something vaguely chemical, and started the descent. The rungs were slippery, some loose. He tested each one before trusting his weight. Lena followed, her small, determined grunts echoing in the shaft. Below, the darkness was absolute. He clicked on the flickering beam of his salvaged flashlight. They were in a sublevel, a network of utility tunnels that ran beneath the terminal. Pipes, thick as pythons, lined the walls, humming with a faint, residual current. The air was colder here, heavy with the smell of stagnant water and decay. But it was, for the moment, silent of immediate pursuit. They moved for what felt like hours, Elias relying on a fading mental map of the airport's underbelly, gleaned from old schematics he'd studied obsessively in the early days. The tunnels twisted and turned, some flooded ankle-deep in foul water, others choked with debris from sections of the terminal that had collapsed during the Great Silence. Once, they heard the distinct, dragging footsteps and wet gurgles of a changed pack moving in a parallel corridor, separated only by a crumbling breeze-block wall. They froze, barely breathing, until the sounds receded. Lena burrowed into his side, her small body racked with silent tremors. He held her, whispering reassurances he didn't feel himself. His plan, if it could be called that, was to reach the old international arrivals processing area, near what used to be customs and immigration. It was a sprawling, multi-level section, largely abandoned even before the silence, notoriously difficult to navigate. And, according to fragmented rumors he'd picked up from other fugitive scavengers, it was the territory of a woman named Zara, a former pilot, some said. Dangerous, resourceful, and utterly solitary. If she even existed, if she did, and if they could find her, perhaps she knew a way out. Or at least, a better place to hide than the death trap Terminal B had become. They were nearing what he hoped was an upward access point when the ground vibrated. A low, distant rumble, followed by another. Explosions. Not the random collapses of the decaying structure, but something deliberate. The Wardens, they were using demolitions, cleansing, as Thorne would call it. Were they trying to seal off sections, or flush out survivors like rats from a sinking ship? Suddenly, a section of the tunnel roof ahead of them groaned, dust and debris raining down. A new sound, the harsh, amplified voice of a warden, echoing through a makeshift PA system from somewhere above. "This is Commander Thorne of the Airport Wardens. All unauthorized personnel in Terminal B are ordered to surrender immediately. Lay down your arms and proceed to Concourse B7. Resistance will be met with decisive force. You have 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Elias's heart sank. They were miles from B7, and surrendering to Thorne was a death sentence of a different kind. The explosions were closer now. They were being herded. He looked at Lena, her face pale in the flashlight beam. Her lower lip trembled, but she met his gaze with a fierce determination that belied her years. "We're not surrendering, are we, Elias?" she whispered. "No, little bird," he said, forcing a grim smile. "We fly." He spotted another ladder, leading upwards into a narrow ventilation shaft. It was a tight squeeze, unmapped, uncertain, but it led away from the direction of Concourse B7. "Up here. Quickly." Just as he was helping Lena onto the first rung, a section of the tunnel behind them collapsed completely, the roar deafening, plunging them into a cloud of choking dust. And from the darkness ahead, where the ladder led, he heard a new sound. Not changed, not wardens. A single, sharp click, like a weapon being readied. They were no longer alone in the dark. Zara watched them from the shadows of the ventilation crosspiece, a grim satisfaction settling in her gut. Amateurs, stumbling through her territory like bewildered cattle. The man was burdened, protective. The girl, small and terrified, but with a spark. She'd heard the warden broadcasts, felt the concussive thumps of their demolitions. Thorne was getting bolder, extending his iron grip. Terminal B had always been a chaotic neutral zone, too riddled with changed and structural instability for the wardens to bother with much beyond occasional punitive raids. Until now. The man, Elias, she'd heard the girl whisper his name, was trying to guide the child up a dangerously rusted access ladder that led, ironically, almost directly to a warden patrol route she'd been monitoring. Idiots. But desperate idiots. She could let them blunder into the patrol. Less competition for scarce resources. Less loose ends. That was the logical, pragmatic choice. The choice that had kept Zara alive when so many others had fallen. But then she saw the girl's face, illuminated for a fleeting second by the man's wavering flashlight beam as she looked up. The raw terror, yes, but also that stubborn spark. It reminded Zara of no. She cut off the thought, a familiar, icy pang in her chest. Attachments were weaknesses, emotions were liabilities. The man froze, flashlight beam darting around as he heard the click of her releasing the safety on her crossbow. She had them dead to rights. "Don't bother." Zara's voice, low and gravelly from disuse, echoed slightly in the narrow shaft. "That ladder's a death trap. And you're making enough noise to wake the dead, or attract worse." Elias shielded Lena instinctively, turning to face the unseen voice. "Who's there? We don't want trouble." His voice was strained, exhausted. "Trouble's found you anyway," Zara replied, a hint of dry amusement in her tone. She could see them clearly now, two frightened figures silhouetted against the faint light from the tunnel below. "Wardens are sweeping this whole sector. Those explosions? That's them, playing Renovator, and you're running right into their arms." A tense silence, broken only by Lena's hitched breathing. "Can you help us?" Elias finally asked, the desperation raw. "We need to get out of Terminal B." Zara almost laughed. Get out? Did he think there was a magical exit, a secret flight to some forgotten paradise? The whole world was Terminal B, in one way or another, but his desperation was a currency. And she was a pragmatist. "Help isn't free," she stated, her voice flat. "Everything has a price." "We don't have much," Elias admitted, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Some preserved food, medical supplies, a water purifier." "I have those," Zara said, unimpressed. She was more interested in the man himself. He fought the changed earlier. She'd heard the distant sounds of that skirmish before the wardens arrived. He was capable, perhaps useful, and the girl was a complication. Before Elias could respond, the distant but distinct sound of approaching warden boots echoed from the tunnel they'd just ascended from, closer than before. Someone must have reported the tunnel collapse and sent a squad to investigate the access points. "Decision time," Zara said, her voice urgent. "Stay here and talk payment with me, or become warden target practice. Your choice. Make it fast." Elias looked from the dark abyss below to the unseen speaker above. He had no good options. But one offered a sliver more uncertainty than the other, and uncertainty, in this world, sometimes meant a sliver of hope. "We're with you," he said, his voice tight. "Just the girl. She's all that matters." Zara felt that familiar, unwelcome flicker of something other than cold calculation. She ignored it. "Follow my instructions. Exactly. No sudden moves. And keep the kid quiet." She shifted, a shadow detaching itself from deeper shadows, and gestured with her crossbow towards a nearly invisible seam in the shaft wall. "This way. And try to keep up." She led them through a series of cramped, winding maintenance passages she'd cleared and secured over the years, her hidden network, the veins of her solitary kingdom. Twice, they had to freeze as warden patrols passed nearby, their voices and the clatter of their gear shockingly close. Elias shielded Lena, his body tense, ready to fight. Zara merely watched, her expression unreadable, her movements economical and precise. She was a creature of this broken airport, perfectly adapted to its shadows and dangers. They finally emerged into a wider space, a forgotten, dust-choked executive lounge, part of an older, decommissioned wing of the terminal. It was remarkably intact, the heavy oak door reinforced from the inside, the windows blacked out, and, unlike the rest of the airport, it was warm. A small, efficient wood-burning stove glowed in one corner, a thin tendril of smoke ingeniously vented through a disguised chimney flue. The place was stocked with supplies, neatly organized, a haven. Lena, exhausted, finally succumbed, slumping against Elias. He gently lowered her to a surprisingly clean pile of blankets. Zara watched them, her crossbow still held loosely but ready. "So," she said, her voice softer now but no less firm, "about that payment." She gestured towards a small, crudely fashioned explosive device on a nearby table, a collection of pipes, wires, and a salvaged battery pack. "I'm planning a little renovation of my own, warden-related, and I could use an extra pair of hands. Particularly ones that know how to handle themselves." Her eyes flicked to the spear on Elias's back, then to the fresh, bloody gashes on his arm. "You look like you fit the bill." Elias looked from the makeshift bomb to Zara, then to Lena sleeping fitfully. He was trading one deadly master for another, perhaps. But this one, at least, seemed to have a vested interest in opposing the wardens. "What kind of renovation?" Zara allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Let's just say I'm not a fan of Thorne's interior decorating, or his policies." She met his gaze, her own eyes like chips of ice. "You help me, I help you disappear when the smoke clears. Maybe, but cross me." She let the threat hang in the air. Then, her expression softened almost imperceptibly as she glanced at the sleeping Lena. "The girl can stay. She'll be safe here. For now." The unspoken implication was clear. Lena was collateral. And leverage. Elias felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settle upon him. But for now, Lena was warm and relatively safe. That was more than he'd had an hour ago. "All right," he said, meeting Zara's challenging stare. "Tell me what you need me to do." The air in Zara's hidden lounge was thick with the scent of burning wood and a fragile, temporary peace. Lena, bundled in blankets, slept soundly for the first time in what felt like an eternity, her small face relaxed, the lines of fear momentarily smoothed away. Elias watched her, a dull ache in his chest. Each breath she took was a victory, a tiny defiance against the collapsed world. He cleaned and bandaged the deep gashes on his arm using supplies from Zara's surprisingly well-stocked medical kit. She hadn't asked how he got them. She simply observed, her expression unreadable. Zara herself moved with an efficient, almost predatory grace, checking her defenses, quietly cataloging her supplies. She was a woman honed to a razor's edge by solitude and survival. Elias found himself wary, yet grudgingly respectful. She hadn't killed them. She'd offered a devil's bargain, but it was a bargain nonetheless. "She dreams of flying," Elias said quietly, breaking the silence. He gestured to the tattered notebook peeking from Lena's small pack, the one with the charcoal airplane. "Still draws them. Planes, going somewhere." Zara paused in sharpening a wicked-looking hunting knife. Her face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes, a brief, quickly suppressed shadow. Hope is a luxury we can't afford, she said, her voice flat. It makes you soft, reckless. Maybe, Elias conceded, dabbing antiseptic on his arm with a wince. Or maybe it's the only thing that makes any of this worth enduring. He thought of Sarah, of Tom. The hope he'd had for their future, extinguished in an instant. Lena was all that remained of that hope, a fragile seedling in a field of ashes. I lost my family, he said, the words tasting like old grief. In the first days, right here in this airport. My wife, my son. He didn't elaborate on the chaos, the screaming, his own desperate failing efforts to hold on to them. The guilt was a familiar shroud. Zara didn't offer sympathy. He hadn't expected her to. She simply nodded, once. Everyone lost someone, she stated, resuming her methodical sharpening. I lost my wings. She tapped the tarnished pilot's insignia still pinned to her worn leather jacket. And the sky. This tin can, she gestured vaguely at the opulent, decaying lounge. It's a cage, a comfortable one for now, but still a cage. So this renovation you're planning, Elias probed, changing the subject. It's more than just a dislike for Thorne's decorating, isn't it? Zara finally set the knife down. Thorne's consolidating power. He's not just clearing out squatters, he's looking for something, or someone. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. Before the silence, there were contingency plans, VIP bunkers, deep-level supply caches, the kind of things governments build for the end of the world. Hartwell was a major international hub. It's rumored some of those facilities are here, beneath the older terminals. Elias felt a chill. And Thorne thinks Terminal B is the key. Or he wants to ensure no one else finds them first, Zara corrected. He's systematic, brutal. He's turning this airport into his own little kingdom. And his enforcers, like that dog Rexus, enjoy their work too much. A flash of genuine anger in her eyes now. They killed a friend of mine, an old mechanic, harmless. Hoarded engine parts, dreamed of getting one of the small cargo planes on the old maintenance strip airworthy again. She snorted, a bitter sound. Foolish dream, but it was his. The silence stretched again, filled now with a shared understanding of loss, and a common enemy. Lena stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, and clutched a small carved wooden bird Elias had made for her. Zara's gaze softened fractionally as she looked at the child, then hardened again as she met Elias's eyes. The wardens are escalating, she said. Their patrols are more frequent, more aggressive. Those demolitions, they're not just sealing off sections, they're channeling things. The changed, and people like us, into kill zones. She picked up the crude explosive device. This is just a welcome gift, a way to remind them that not everyone in Terminal B is helpless prey. But it won't stop them, not for long. What's your plan then? Elias asked. Beyond this. Zara looked at him, a long, measuring gaze. My plan was to stay alive, alone. You and the girl are a complication I didn't account for. She sighed, a rare sign of weariness. But Thorne's new push changes things. If he takes full control of B, my quiet little life here is over. She paused. There are old service tunnels, some not even on the official schematics. They run deep. Some say they connect to the old transit lines that led out of the airport, before they were sealed. A flicker of something akin to Lena's naive hope sparked in Elias, quickly doused by caution. You think there's a way out? Out of the airport entirely? Maybe, Zara said, her voice carefully neutral. It's a long shot, a ghost story. But it's better than waiting for Thorne to kick down the door. She met his gaze directly. If we can create a big enough diversion, something to pull the bulk of his forces away from the deeper access points, we might have a window. Just then, a sharp crackle from a battered shortwave radio in the corner made them both jump. It was usually silent, a relic Zara kept more for parts than for listening. But now, a voice, distorted by static but unmistakably official, cut through the quiet. Repeat, all Warden units, Sector Gamma -7, possible hostile contact. Small arms fire reported near Old Customs checkpoint. Commander Thorne orders immediate containment. All available personnel converge. Elias and Zara exchanged a look. Gamma -7. That was perilously close to one of the deep tunnel access points Zara had mentioned. Were other survivors being flushed out, or was it a warden trap? Sounds like someone else is having a bad day, Zara murmured, her hand already reaching for her crossbow. The brief respite was over, the fragile peace shattered. The airport was stirring again, its dangers closing in. Lena, disturbed by the sudden tension, began to wake, her eyes blinking sleepily, unaware of the new threat that hung in the air, as tangible as the scent of smoke and fear. The sanctuary, however temporary, felt suddenly very small, very vulnerable. Sergeant Rexus kicked open the flimsy door of the makeshift shack, his boot connecting with a satisfying crunch. Inside, a scrawny man, reeking of fear and unwashed desperation, cowered against a pile of refuse. "Well, well, what have we here?" Rexus drawled, his lips curling into a predatory smile. Marcus stood behind him, rifle held loosely, his stomach churning. This was the hostile contact in Sector Gamma -7. One terrified scavenger who'd probably fired a rusty pipe gun in panic. "He's got nothing, Sarge," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. The man was shaking, his eyes darting between them like a trapped animal. "Everyone's got something, recruit," Rexus corrected, stepping into the shack. He grabbed the man by his filthy shirt front, hauling him up. "Information, for example. Where are the others? The ones setting off those little welcoming parties in Terminal B." He was referring to Zara's welcome gift, the small explosion that had echoed through the terminals a few hours ago, sending warden patrols scrambling. The scavenger babbled incoherently, pure terror in his eyes. Rexus backhanded him, a sharp, brutal crack. "Speak sense, filth, or I'll loosen your tongue permanently." Marcus flinched. This was what Thorne called necessary surgery. It looked more like vicious butchery to him. He thought of the commander's speeches, the rhetoric about order and the greater good. It all sounded so noble from a distance. Up close, it stank of blood and fear. "Please," the scavenger choked out, blood trickling from his lip. "I don't know. I'm alone, just trying to survive." Rexus laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Alone? Nobody's alone in this rat pit unless they're dead, or about to be." He pressed the muzzle of his sidearm under the man's chin. "Last chance. Who's causing trouble in B? The woman? The one they call the ghost pilot? Or is it the new rats, the ones with the kid?" The man's eyes widened at the mention of the kid. A flicker of something. Recognition? Defiance? Rexus saw it too. "Ah," he purred. "So you do know something." "Leave him, Rexus," Marcus suddenly heard himself say. The words were out before he could stop them. Rexus's head snapped around, his eyes like chips of ice. "What did you say, recruit?" His voice was dangerously soft. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd crossed a line. But the sight of the scavenger's abject terror, the memory of Thorne's cold pronouncements, it all coalesced into a sick realization. This wasn't order. This was tyranny. He's no threat. He's just scared. Rexus slowly lowered his sidearm, a truly terrifying smile spreading across his face. "Scared? Good. Fear is a tool, Marcus. A motivator. And you, son, look like you could use some motivation yourself." He took a step towards Marcus, who instinctively tightened his grip on his rifle. "Getting soft? Starting to think for yourself?" Thorne doesn't like thinkers. He likes soldiers. Before Marcus could respond, Rexus's radio crackled. It was Thorne's voice, calm and cold. "Rexus, report. Any progress on the Terminal B insurgents?" Rexus kept his eyes locked on Marcus, a silent promise of future retribution in their depths. He keyed his mic. "Making progress now, Commander. Got a live one here." About to sing like a canary. He winked at Marcus, then turned back to the scavenger, his demeanor shifting back to casual brutality. "Now, about that ghost pilot and her new friends." Marcus watched, helpless and horrified, as Rexus began his interrogation. The sounds were sickening. He wanted to look away, to run, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. This was the reality of Thorne's new world order. This was what he had signed up for. Later, as they dragged the broken, barely conscious scavenger back towards the warden command post, Rexus was almost jovial. "See, recruit? A little pressure, and they spill everything. This Zara has a hideout in the old executive wing, and she's got the man and the girl with her. Thorne will be pleased. He wants Terminal B sanitized, permanently." Marcus felt a wave of nausea. Sanitized. Like vermin. He thought of the kid Rexus mentioned. He had a younger sister, lost in the great silence. The thought of a child caught in this. As they neared the command post, Thorn himself emerged, flanked by two heavily armed guards. His gaze was like a physical weight. "Sergeant Rexus, what have you learned?" "The ghost pilot, Zara, is holed up in the old Apollo lounge, Terminal B, Sector Delta," Rexus reported, a note of triumph in his voice. "She's got the man we've been tracking, Elias Vance, former airport security, and a young girl with her. They're the ones behind the recent disruptions." Thorn nodded slowly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Vance. Yes, his name has come up. Resourceful. And the girl." He paused. "Excellent work, Sergeant. Prepare your teams. We will conduct a full surgical strike on the Apollo lounge. I want them contained. Alive, if possible. Especially the girl." "Alive?" Marcus felt a sliver of desperate hope. Maybe Thorn wasn't entirely devoid of. "The girl is a valuable asset," Thorn continued, his voice devoid of any emotion. "There are interested parties outside the airport who value unspoiled genetic material. Children are rare. Healthy children, rarer still, a significant bargaining chip for our community's future." The hope in Marcus's chest turned to ice. Unspoiled genetic material, bargaining chip, not a child, a commodity. He saw it then, the true depth of Thorn's ambition, the chilling pragmatism that masqueraded as order. This wasn't about survival. It was about power, control, and a future built on the exploitation of the vulnerable. The wardens weren't saviors, they were slavers in new uniforms. "And Vance and the woman?" Rexus asked, a gleam in his eye. "Expendable," Thorn said without hesitation. "Unless they offer information leading to the primary objective. The old government fail, safes. Some believe they contain technology, resources, perhaps even a way to reverse the silence. That is the true prize beneath this airport's ruins. Terminal B is merely the gateway." Marcus felt sick. The full, monstrous scope of Thorn's plan was laid bare. He wasn't just clearing out a terminal, he was hunting for a mythical treasure, willing to sacrifice anyone, trade anything, to get it. And Lena, the little girl, was just another pawn in his grotesque game. Thorn turned, his gaze falling on Marcus. "You look pale, recruit. The realities of this world are harsh, are they not? But it is through such harshness that a new world will be forged." He placed a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You will be part of Rexus's strike team, an opportunity to prove your mettle, to demonstrate your commitment to the cause." Marcus met Thorn's gaze, his mind reeling. The commander's eyes were like polished steel, reflecting nothing but cold, unyielding resolve. The betrayal was absolute, not of a person, but of every ideal Marcus had clung to. He nodded slowly, a mask of obedience falling into place. But beneath it, a spark of rebellion, ignited by horror and disgust, began to burn. He had to do something. He didn't know what, but he couldn't be a part of this, the Apollo lounge. He knew its general location, and he knew, with a chilling certainty, that time was running out for the people inside. The crackle of the captured warden radio was a death knell. Elias and Zara listened, faces grim, as Thorn's clipped, emotionless voice detailed the impending surgical strike on the Apollo lounge. "Containment of the girl is primary. Vance and the woman, expendable. Rexus will lead." "They know." Elias breathed, the words like ice in his throat. "They know exactly where we are." He looked at Lena, who was now wide awake, her eyes fixed on the radio with dawning comprehension. Fear, sharp and acrid, filled the small lounge. Zara was already moving, her earlier weariness replaced by a focused, lethal intensity. She kicked dirt over the embers in the stove, plunging the room into deeper shadow. "The scavenger," Zara hissed, her voice tight with fury. "Rexus must have broken him, damn it." She slammed her fist against a metal locker. "My mistake, getting complacent, thinking this hole was secure." "No time for blame," Elias said, his mind racing. "How long do we have?" "Not long. Rexus moves fast when he smells blood." Zara was already checking her crossbow, strapping extra quarrels to her forearm. "This place is a death trap now. We need to move. The deep tunnels are our only chance." Lena ran to Elias, her small face pale but resolute. "I'm not a bargaining chip," she whispered fiercely, echoing Thorn's monstrous words they'd just overheard. Her courage was a painful, beautiful thing. "No, you're not," Elias said, hugging her tight. "And we're not going to let them take you." He looked at Zara. Those deep tunnels you mentioned. The ones that might lead out. Can we reach them before Rexus gets here? Zara shook her head. Too far. They'll cut us off. The main access points from this sector will be swarming with wardens. She paused, a desperate, calculating light in her eyes. But there's another way. Riskier. Much riskier. It means going back into the heart of Terminal BC, creating a diversion they can't ignore. Something big enough to pull Rexus and his hounds off our scent. Terminal B? Elias felt a chill. They'd just escaped it. To go back now, with wardens actively hunting them. What kind of diversion? The fuel lines, Zara said, her voice grim. Under the old domestic concourse, some of them are still live, carrying residual jet fuel. If we can rig a series of controlled explosions, it would create chaos, fire, panic, enough to draw every warden in this quadrant. Elias stared at her. That's insane. We could bring the whole concourse down on our heads, and a fire like that will draw them from miles. It's a long shot, Zara admitted, but it's the only shot we have if we want to give the girl a chance. She looked at Lena, then back at Elias, her gaze unwavering. I know a route through the old baggage handling system. It bypasses most of the main concourses. It'll get us close to the fuel line access. From there, we improvise. He looked at Lena, at her small, determined face. She trusted him, and right now, Zara, with her wild, desperate plan, was their only hope. All right, he said, his voice hoarse. We do it your way, but Lena stays with me, every step. Zara nodded, agreed. She grabbed a battered duffel bag, stuffing it with tools, some of her carefully hoarded incendiaries, and a coil of wire. We travel light, fast. No mistakes. Their escape from the Apollo lounge was frantic. They slipped out through a concealed service hatch just as the first sounds of Rexus's team echoed from the main corridor, heavy boots, the metallic click of weapons being readied. They plunged back into the suffocating darkness of the airport's underbelly, Zara leading the way with an unnerving familiarity, Elias following close behind, Lena clinging to his hand. The baggage handling system was a disorienting maze of conveyor belts, dark tunnels, and echoing chambers. The air was thick with the smell of old rubber, stale machinery, and something else, a faint, sweet, cloying scent that made Elias's skin crawl. They were close. Twice, they had to flatten themselves against a grimy wall as warden patrols passed nearby, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Lena barely breathed, her small body pressed tight against Elias. The tension was a living thing coiling in his stomach. Zara moved with a silent, deadly efficiency, her senses on high alert. She pointed out tripwires, crumbling sections of floor, nests of grotesque, pulsating fungi that seemed to thrive in the perpetual darkness. This was her world, and Elias realized with a growing unease that survival here had carved away much of what made her human. Or perhaps, it had revealed a core of pure, unadulterated will to live. They finally reached a heavily reinforced door marked, Fuel Line Access, Authorized Personnel Only. The lock was rusted, ancient. Zara produced a set of tension wrenches and picks from her bag, her fingers working with surprising dexterity. This is it, she whispered, her breath misting in the cold air. Once we're through here, there's no turning back. She glanced at Elias, a strange expression on her face, not fear, but something akin to fatalistic resolve. You ready for this, airport security? Before Elias could answer, a blood-curdling shriek echoed from the tunnel behind them, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a struggle, warden shouts, weapon fire, and the guttural roars of the Changed. Rexus's team had run into something, or something had run into them. They're engaged, Zara said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. That buys us a little time, but not much. The lock clicked. She pushed the heavy door inward, revealing a narrow catwalk overlooking a cavernous chamber filled with a spaghetti-like tangle of massive pipes. The air reeked of volatile chemicals. Welcome to the heart of the beast, Zara murmured. Let's give it some indigestion. As they stepped onto the catwalk, Elias's flashlight beam caught movement in the shadows below. Not wardens, something else. Multiple figures, pale and bloated, their bodies grotesquely swollen, moving with a slow, deliberate purpose among the pipes. They weren't the usual, frenzied Changed. These were different, more sinister. What are they? Lena whispered, her voice trembling. Zara's face was pale. Fuelers, she breathed. Old stories. Thought they were myths. Change that have adapted, drawn to the fuel. They guard it. One of the fuelers looked up, its milky, sightless eyes seeming to fix on them. It emitted a low, hissing sound, and a long, translucent tendril snaked out from its arm, dripping a viscous, shimmering liquid. Their desperate plan had just become infinitely more complicated. The wardens were behind them, the changed were below them, and they were standing on a precipice, about to light a match in a powder keg. Terminal B was ready for its last stand, and it seemed determined to take them all with it. The air in the fuel chamber was thick enough to chew, a noxious cocktail of petrochemical fumes and the damp, earthy scent of the grotesque fuelers. Elias kept Lena tucked behind him, his spear held ready, his eyes darting between the silent, watching figures below and Zara, who was already moving along the narrow catwalk. Her gaze fixed on a junction of pipes further into the chamber. The hissing from the fuelers grew louder, a chorus of reptilian disapproval. "They're slow," Zara muttered, her voice tight, "but there are a lot of them. And whatever that stuff they drip is, I don't want it touching me." She pointed with her crossbow. "That manifold there. If we can set charges on the primary feeder lines, it'll cause a cascade. Big boom, big fire." "And us?" Elias asked, his voice barely audible above the hissing and the distant muffled sounds of the ongoing battle between Rexus's team and the other changed. "We get to the emergency shutoff valve access tunnel," Zara said, gesturing to a small rusted hatch on the far side of the chamber. "It should, theoretically, lead to a fire containment corridor. From there, to the deeper tunnels, if we're fast and lucky." Luck. Elias snorted inwardly. Luck had abandoned this airport, and everyone in it, a long time ago. Meanwhile, in a parallel service corridor not far from the Apollo lounge, Marcus stumbled over a piece of rubble, his breath tearing at his lungs. He'd slipped away from Rexus's main assault team during the chaos when the Changed had ambushed them. The sounds of that fight were fading behind him now, replaced by the pounding of his own heart. He had to warn them. Elias, Zara, the girl. He knew Thorne's orders. He knew what Rexus would do if he got his hands on them. He had a stolen Warden radio, its frequency hopefully still open. He fumbled with it, his hands shaking. "Apollo lounge occupants. This is Warden Recruit Marcus. Thorne knows. Rexus is coming for the girl. He means to take her. The others. Expendable. Static. Did they hear?" Was it too late? He had to get closer, try to find them, do something. Anything. Back in the fuel chamber, Zara was carefully placing her first incendiary charge, her movements precise despite the growing menace from below. More fuelers were emerging from the shadows, their pale, bloated forms almost luminous in the gloom. One of them, larger than the others, began to climb a thick pipe, its tendrils questing upwards towards the catwalk. "Elias, cover me," Zara snapped, not looking up from her work. Elias lunged, thrusting his spear downwards. The sharpened metal point sank into the fueler's shoulder. It shrieked, a sound like tearing canvas, and recoiled, its tendril whipping wildly, spattering the catwalk with a corrosive, sizzling liquid that ate into the metal. Lena cried out, pressing herself against the railing. "We need to hurry," Elias yelled, yanking his spear free. More fuelers were now attempting to climb, their progress slow but relentless. The catwalk, old and rusted, groaned under their combined, unseen weight. Zara finished wiring the first charge. "One down, 2 to go," she shouted over the growing cacophony. She scrambled along the catwalk towards the next junction, Elias moving to intercept another climbing fueler. He could feel the vibrations through his boots as the creatures below swarmed the support pillars. The entire structure felt unstable. Suddenly, Marcus's desperate, static-laced voice crackled from Zara's radio, which she'd clipped to her belt. "Apollo lounge. Rexus. Coming for the girl. Expendable." Zara froze for a split second, then swore. "He's still alive? And Rexus isn't tied up with those changed anymore." "They're coming." She looked at Elias, her face a mask of grim determination. "Change of plan. No time for fancy wiring. We blow what we have. Now. It won't be as big, but it'll be enough to cause chaos." "What about the shut-off valve tunnel?" Elias yelled, kicking a grasping tendril away from Lena. "Forget it. We go back the way we came, try to lose them in the baggage tunnels. It's our only chance. Zara fumbled with a detonator. Just then, a section of the catwalk near the entrance sagged violently. Heavy bootsteps. Figures emerged from the darkness of the access tunnel they'd just left. Wardens. Led by Sergeant Rexus himself, his face a snarl of fury, his weapon raised. Well, well, Rexus bellowed, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Look what we have here, a little rat party, and you brought the package, Vance. Smart. His eyes fixed on Lena, a predatory gleam in them. Elias pushed Lena further behind him. You'll never get her, Rexus. Rexus laughed. Oh, I think I will. And I'll enjoy teaching you some manners first, Vance. And you, Ghost Pilot. Thorn wants a word about your unauthorized fireworks. Several wardens fanned out behind Rexus, their weapons trained on Elias and Zara. Below, the fuelers, agitated by the new arrivals and the smell of fresh prey, redoubled their efforts to reach the catwalk. The entire structure shuddered. Zara held up the detonator. One more step, Rexus, and we all go up in smoke. This whole place is a bomb. Rexus's eyes narrowed. He knew she wasn't bluffing. Not entirely. Brave words. But you won't sacrifice the girl. Vance won't let you. He gestured with his rifle. Drop it, now, or the kid gets it first. One of his men took careful aim at Lena. Elias felt a cold dread. Trapped. Wardens in front, fuelers below. The catwalk groaning. He looked at Zara. Her eyes were blazing with desperate defiance. This was it. The last stand indeed. But not here. Not like this. Then a new voice, amplified by a bullhorn, cut through the tension. Rexus, stand down. That is an order. Commander Thorn himself stood at the entrance to the fuel chamber, flanked by more elite guards. His expression was thunderous. Rexus looked momentarily surprised, then scowled. Commander, I have them. The girl is secure. You have endangered the primary asset, Sergeant. Thorn's voice was like cracking ice. And potentially compromised the entire substructure with your recklessness. I gave you an order to contain, not to engage in a firefight in a goddamn fuel depot. The momentary distraction was all Zara needed. Now, Elias, she screamed, and slammed her thumb down on the detonator. The world erupted. The explosion wasn't as catastrophic as Zara had perhaps initially planned, but it was devastating enough. The pipe junction she'd targeted ruptured with a deafening roar, spewing a plume of fire and black smoke towards the roof. The catwalk bucked violently. Alarms, long dormant, shrieked to life throughout the facility, their discordant wails adding to the pandemonium. The force of the blast threw Elias and Lena against the railing. Rexus and his men were momentarily stunned, some knocked off their feet. Thorn, further back, was shielded by his guards but roared in fury. Get the girl, Rexus screamed, recovering quickly, his face blackened by soot. The fire was spreading fast, licking at the other pipes. The fuelers below shrieked. Some ignited into living torches, their grotesque bodies melting and collapsing. The heat was intense. The emergency ladder. Zara yelled, pointing to a rusted, narrow ladder leading down from their section of the catwalk, away from the main fire but perilously close to the thrashing, burning fuelers. It's our only way. Elias grabbed Lena. Hold on tight. He practically threw her onto Zara's back, who, despite her slighter build, secured the child with surprising strength. Go. I'll cover you. He turned to face Rexus, who was advancing through the smoke and chaos, his eyes burning with hatred. Wardens were firing, their shots pinging off the metalwork around Elias. He felt a searing pain in his side as a bullet grazed him. You're not getting away, Vance, Rexus bellowed. Elias raised his spear, a defiant roar tearing from his own throat. He was no soldier, just a desperate man, but he would sell his life dearly to buy them time. He charged, a wild, unexpected assault, aiming for Rexus, for the heart of the storm. The battle for Terminal B had reached its fiery crescendo. The fuel chamber became a vision of hell. Flames roared, casting demonic, dancing shadows. Black smoke choked the air, stinging eyes and scorching lungs. The shrieks of burning fuelers mingled with the bark of Warden rifles and the defiant yells of Elias as he met Rexus's advance. Zara, with Lena clinging to her back like a limpet, scrambled down the rickety emergency ladder, each rung protesting under their combined weight. Hot debris rained around them. Elias fought like a man possessed. His spear was a blur, deflecting a rifle butt, jabbing at exposed limbs. He was outnumbered, outgunned, but fueled by a desperate father's protective rage. He saw Rexus's face through the swirling smoke, contorted with fury. A heavy blow connected with Elias's already injured arm, sending waves of agony through him, and his spear clattered to the metal grating. Rexus grinned, raising his rifle like a club. Just as Rexus was about to bring the weapon down, a section of the catwalk above them, weakened by the explosion and fire, groaned and then tore loose with a screech of tortured metal. It crashed down between Elias and Rexus, a fiery, smoking barricade, momentarily separating them. "Elias!" Zara screamed from below, her voice hoarse. She and Lena had reached the bottom of the ladder, a small platform just above the chamber floor, which was now a writhing inferno of burning fuel and dying changed. "Go, get Lena out of here," Elias yelled back, scrambling away from the advancing flames. He coughed, his vision blurring from the smoke and pain. He saw another access hatch nearby, one he hadn't noticed before, half hidden behind a bank of machinery. Maybe, just maybe. Thorn, his face a mask of cold fury, was shouting orders from the relative safety of the main entrance. "Contain the fire. Secure the girl. Rexus, I want Vance alive." He knows more than he's telling. Thorn's gaze swept the chaotic scene, his eyes lingering on the spreading fire with a calculating intensity. This disaster might yet be turned to his advantage if it flushed out whatever secrets lay deeper within the terminal. Rexus, enraged by the temporary reprieve Elias had gained, roared and began to clamber over the fallen, burning debris. "You're not escaping me, Vance." Zara hesitated at the edge of the platform, torn. She could see another narrow tunnel leading away from the inferno, likely a fire escape route. But Elias, "I can't just leave him," she yelled, her voice laced with an unfamiliar emotion. Lena, her face streaked with soot and tears, looked back towards the sound of Elias's fight. "Elias," she cried, her small voice piercing through the din. That cry seemed to galvanize Elias. He found a desperate surge of strength. He spotted a heavy wrench lying near the machinery, grabbed it, and turned to face the oncoming Rexus. But even as he did, he saw Marcus, the young warden recruit, appear from a side passage, his face pale but determined. Marcus raised his rifle, not at Elias, but at the warden closest to Rexus, firing a short, controlled burst that sent the man sprawling. "What in the traitor?" Rexus bellowed, momentarily distracted. That was all Elias needed. He lunged, not at Rexus, but at a large, clearly marked emergency fire suppression lever on the wall. With a desperate heave, fueled by adrenaline, he pulled it down. With a deafening hiss, torrents of white fire suppressant foam erupted from nozzles in the ceiling, instantly obscuring vision, choking the flames, and creating utter chaos. The chamber filled with a blinding, disorienting blizzard. "Now, Zara, go," Elias screamed into the whiteout, hoping she could hear. He stumbled towards where he thought the hidden hatch was, the foam already up to his knees. Zara didn't need telling twice. "Hold on, Lena," she yelled, and plunged into the escape tunnel, guided more by instinct than sight. The foam was disorienting, but it also offered cover. Thorn cursed, his voice muffled by the foam. "Find them, find the girl. Rexus, get control of your men." But his commands were lost in the sudden, blinding chaos. The wardens, caught off guard, were disoriented, some slipping and falling in the rapidly accumulating foam. Elias fumbled for the latch of the hidden hatch, his lungs screaming for air. He found it, wrenched it open, and tumbled through into a narrow, dark passage, just as Rexus, bellowing in rage, lunged through the foam towards where he'd last seen him. The heavy hatch slammed shut behind Elias, the sound of Rexus's fist hammering against it a dull thud. He lay there for a moment, gasping, his body screaming in protest. He was alive. Battered, burned, but alive. He prayed Zara and Lena had made it clear. The sounds of the fuel chamber, the dying fire, the shouts of the wardens, the hiss of the foam, were muffled now. He was in some kind of maintenance crawlspace, tight and dark. He forced himself to move. He had to find Zara and Lena. He had to know they were safe. He crawled, blindly at first, then his eyes adjusted to the near-total darkness. The tunnel sloped downwards. He could hear dripping water. Was this one of the deep access tunnels Zara had spoken of? After what felt like an age, he saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. He crawled towards it, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. He emerged into a slightly larger tunnel, a disused service conduit, and there, huddled together, were Zara and Lena. Lena rushed to him, throwing her arms around his neck, sobbing with relief. "You made it," Zara breathed, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips before quickly vanishing. She looked almost as battered as he felt. That was insane, even for me. "Marcus," Elias said, remembering the young warden. "He helped." Zara nodded. "Saw it. Kid's got guts, or a death wish." Lena pulled back, looking at Elias with wide, worried eyes. "Are you okay?" He managed a weak smile. "Been better, but I'll live." He looked around. The tunnel was old, the air stale but breathable. "Where are we?" Zara pointed down the tunnel. "This connects to the old subway line that used to service the airport. It was sealed off decades ago. Most of it collapsed during the silence. But there are sections. Legends say some of them run for miles, deep under the city." "A way out?" Elias whispered, hardly daring to hope. "Maybe," Zara said, her usual caution returning. "Or just a deeper hole to die in, but it's away from Thorn, for now." She listened intently. "The wardens will be regrouping. They'll be hunting us. And Thorn, he won't give up on finding those fail-safes. Or Lena." The fight for Terminal B was over. They had survived, against all odds. But the war for their future, for Lena's future, had just begun. Elias looked at the small, determined girl beside him, her hand once again gripping his tightly. He looked at Zara, the cynical pilot who had risked everything. They were a broken, desperate trio, refugees from a fallen world, but they were together. And in the suffocating darkness of the long, uncertain tunnel ahead, that small fact was a flicker of light, as precious and defiant as Lena's charcoal airplanes. The airport was behind them, a smoldering ruin. What lay ahead was unknown, terrifying, but they would face it, together.